and I want to, and that almost creates almost sort of a feel of excitement in it. If Christ came back and said, "I want to," I would, I did, let's do this. And I do think, what are some things? I think there are things that definitely stick out with me about this leper. One thing about just leprosy is a disease that still exists in our world today, but doesn't quite have the power that it had certainly over the ancient world. I mean, this was about the worst disease you could have in the ancient world. You were very definitely, quarantined. You were isolated. You were considered one of the most unclean people. People would always stay away from you. It was a very rough disease. In fact, it was the rule was ironically was but 4 cubits that you had to stay away from a person with leprosy. I find that a little ironic because that kind of matches with our 6-foot social distancing rules that we've just been through. But that was Roman society actually had that rule that you had to stay with it. You had to stay 4 cubits within. You had to stay away from the leper 4 cubits, and they were required to help you, stay away from you too. So this was, as low as a person as it could be in their society. That took the courage to come up to Jesus here. Okay, had the confidence that Jesus would overlook that. Would overlook the fact that he's not supposed to be near him. In fact, I think one thing that's powerful. Well, we'll get to that in a second. So his confidence, the "if you are willing" that we're talking about, I think one thing that's powerful about that is the humility that the man showed. He doesn't come really necessarily as what you might call he doesn't call with any expectation. He just calls with some hope. Comes with some hope. Doesn't come with any feeling of demand, any feeling of any feeling that he has the right to have Jesus heal him. He just comes and throws himself at Jesus. If you are willing, I think it's a powerful statement there. And then he comes in complete reverence. That Jesus is completely able to do what he would desire. What do you all think about this? What do you all think about this letter?
That should be a comfort to people that you have something in your life and you think that God is not going to accept me, or there's no. I'm just so sinful that there's never, God's just not going to be there for me. That tells me that He's always willing.
Yes.
Always willing. You have to ask,
right,
and have the heart to accept that.
Right. I think that's a very powerful message of this passage. No, it does. It says it reached. So he reached out his hand and touched him. So that means he violated the 4 cubits rule. And again, completely was not worried about his position in society. Christ is not at all. I think previous points are very, very well taken. All right, let's move on to the next passage, which is a little bit longer passage where you have the centurion, Would someone like to read Matthew 8:5-13 for me?
And when Jesus entered Capernaum, the centurion came to him, begging him, and saying, Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home, terribly tormented. Jesus said unto him, I will come and heal him. But the centurion replied, Lord, I am not worthy for you to come under my roof, but just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I am also a man under authority, with soldiers under me, and I say to this one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my slave, do this, and he does it. Now when Jesus heard this, he was amazed and said to him who were following, truly I say unto you, I have found such great faith with anyone in Israel. And I say to you that many will come from the east and west and recline at my table with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the sons of the kingdom will be thrown out into utter darkness, in that place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And Jesus said to the centurion, go, and it shall be done for you as you have believed. And the servant was healed at that very moment.
Okay. Very, very good. So, Roman centurion. So, first of all, clearly a Gentile, right? If he's a centurion, if he's a Roman centurion, he certainly is definitely a Gentile. Mm-hmm. What was a Roman centurion? So, it's offshore over 100 people. These hundred soldiers would be doing what in Judea, Palestine, Galilee. Keeping the peace. They were, in a sense, they were the occupying power. You know, they were keeping the peace. One thing that's kind of interesting, there's probably about 7 centurions that are probably mentioned in the New Testament in various places. You know, different encounters, of which this is one. Just about in every single encounter, the centurion actually ends up kind of coming off looking pretty favorable. You know, I mean, it's which if you think about the situation here, that is a little surprising, considering these would be very much a symbol of the oppression, that the Jews were under Rome here. So, what do you think of the comparison of the authority that the centurion prescribes to himself and the authority he recognizes in Christ? What do you think of that comparison? That he goes through and says, I know what authority is. I've got 100 men under me. I know what authority is. And I see that you have it. What do you think of that comparison?
Two things. I'm curious about how he got there. I tend to think this is up in Capernaum. This is up in the north end.
Yes, it is.
So he might have been close by when the hawk thing happened. Or was that after? What was it when Jesus came off the boat and there was the man?
Talking about when the still of waters.
Well, the swine.
Legion.
Demon possession. That I think is coming up later. Yes,
later?
yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Sometimes I get my sequence
Yes.
out of place there.
Yes.
But I've wondered how he, in any event, would have come to have had this perception of all this. And it's risky. The request is risky. Mm-hmm. If this got back to Italy, it wouldn't really look good in his military record.
Right. That your soldier is saying, oh, this guy has authority too.
You're asking for help from these mystical gods of the Jews, and that really wasn't good. So it showed a tremendous faith, I believe, and again to help a Gentile. There's just a lot involved in that.
One thing that's also interesting is the fact that the centurion would care enough about his servant to risk this. Normally you wouldn't necessarily put your neck on the line for someone who just was a servant of yours.
But something that may not have been. I've wondered about that too, and I'll quit after this. But this may not have been a servant who took the kids to school or cooked meals or whatever. This I've always wondered if this might have been just an underling in the military with him.
Right, like it's
Corporal.
aide de camp or something like that.
It takes two to build a construction project. It takes a project manager and takes a superintendent.
Right.
And that relationship is often not good. So anytime I've had a good superintendent that I could trust and work along, that meant a lot to me. And I have wondered if this servant were an underling in his work rather than maybe somebody who aided him in his family personally.
Unlike when Jesus went into the temple and turned over the money changers and released all the doves, turned over the tables and everything, they asked him, well, what authority do you have to do this? Unlike them, the centurion said, you have authority. I recognize your authority.
He looked at what was going on and recognized that there's authority.
So, complete opposite.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Scott, in answer to maybe to Randy's question, in Luke's account, Jesus had done a lot of healing in various places before.
It does seem
this, so.
Yes, knowing the order of the miracles and so forth is sometimes a little bit tricky to even discern. But yes, obviously there probably has been several miracles that the centurion has probably witnessed. That several of these other healings, like the one we just read with the leper, he has probably seen other signs such as this. So the last part of this passage talks about this messianic banquet, and so he again, the Roman is the symbol to the Jews of the oppression. Would be of the oppression, or would be a symbol, and the fact that Christ is implying that this person might get into the banquet at the end, and some of you may not, to some of his Jewish listeners or whatever, is a strong statement, that carries with it some risk. The bottom line is, what is Christ kind of saying here? What is Christ saying is what's going to happen with what's changing about the way that you will be one of God's chosen people? What's changing? It's going to be by faith. It's not going to be by birthright. It's going to be by faith. It's going to be by faith. And the centurion is certainly completely showing that. All right. All right. So we have, someone read 14 through 17.
And when Jesus entered Peter's house, he saw his mother-in-law lying sick with a fever. He touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she rose and began to serve him. That evening they brought to him many who were oppressed by demons, and he cast out the spirits with a word, and healed all who were sick. This was to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet Isaiah. He took our illnesses and bore our diseases.
So it's here we have the mention of Peter's mother-in-law. The couple of interesting things I found out that I didn't know as I was looking at some of this is that there is a Christian tradition that Peter's wife actually worked pretty hand in hand with Peter during the ministry and actually was martyred with Peter. That not crucified like Peter was. Peter was crucified upside down, but martyred at the same time. Basically part of the same execution. And was not, and I never heard that before looking into some stuff on this. But they come into Peter's home, and he immediately heals her. Probably this fever, the way this word is used, is probably malaria. Is probably what they suspect she might have. Obviously we don't know that for sure, but that's what. But obviously a serious disease. But it's very possible that she had here. One thing I think is a little bit interesting is that she immediately, she didn't rest, didn't want to recuperate. She immediately got up and started working. As soon as she was healed, she moved on there. And then we mentioned that there are some other miracles that are occurring at the same time. This is a passage in Isaiah, I wrote it down here, Isaiah 53:4 is what's being quoted there. About taking on our illnesses. One thing that was, what do you see? Are you turning to, let's look at Isaiah 53:4 real quick. I'll go ahead and just read it real quick. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. Now that's not exactly the way Matthew quoted that passage. And one of the things that was kind of, and you see this a little bit in Luke's kind of telling of the same period, that one commentary kind of raised is, what do you think it was like for Jesus to heal him, as far as what it was to him? There's a couple of things, and I don't get real huge philosophical here, but about what it means to be 100% God, 100% man, and things like that. But there's like, for instance, we're going to read a passage here in just a minute about that when that God can feel the power come out of them, that Jesus mentions he can feel the power come out of them when someone touches his cloak. And, one of the commentators kind of mentioned, is it possible that this actually was tiring, for Jesus to do this? And I say that not to at all diminish Christ as much as to say, okay, this is not, he is human. He would, just like any good act we do, we can get worn out if we're doing it all the time. That's, sometimes we may want to think of, it may not have been as simple as just walking around, and, you're healed, and then, like nothing happened. I do not know, but the fact that it mentions that he bore our illnesses, may imply that there's something, that the human part of Christ had to work in a sense to do that. Yes.
I was thinking more in the mental capacity, the seeing all this in front of him all the time.
Having the anguish of being in this situation where
yes.
sick people are being, yes, okay.
And seeing all that,
that's an interesting
even though he
perspective
can
too that I
fix
definitely,
it.
yeah, I can see that too. Yes.
I was thinking also there's something in making sure it happens in God's timing, because he's always saying, now don't go tell anybody about
right.
this, and he's trying to, because this could have been just pandemonium, people, and he would have to escape and get away and go pray, and so I think there's kind of that anguish, if you will, that
right.
like just the tiring
right.
of let's do this in the right time at the right pace.
Right. I think that's definitely a good thought, and I have to talk more about why he kept telling people not to tell people at the next passage. So I do want to dive into that a little bit deeper when we get to that today. But in the passage, in the future passage where he has that same command. But I think there's definite, there are reasons why we just can't heal everybody right now and have everybody be happy right now, and everybody spreading the word that it's time for everybody to be healed. There definitely are factors in play there.
Scott, so you mentioned it, sometimes maybe we don't think of as much,
as far as doing the work of God, sometimes it's emotionally draining. And I don't think sometimes we understand, unless you've actually done some preaching and done some sermons and things, really, there are certain times that with sermons that I don't think how much drain it is on the preacher. Like just a 30-minute sermon can wipe you out for almost the rest of the day.
Sure.
Because of just I wouldn't say pressure, but knowing that God's work has to be done.
Yes.
And not every sermon is easy to preach.
Yes, certainly true. Certainly.
And then one other thought just quick is going back to the leper and Peter's mother-in-law, Jesus reached out and touched him. And the comment that he made that he was willing to do that. And if we're going to be like Jesus, we need to ask ourselves, who are we willing to touch? Because we're not very willing sometimes to touch who Jesus touched.
And again, if the leper was as low as on that totem pole as you could get in their eyes, Christ was willing to touch him.
Yes, God, and the other thing is, it was personal to Jesus. He had the power to just, everybody within whatever he could heal.
Right.
He had that power, but it was always personal.
Right.
And people would approach him and
right.
He
wanted that interaction.
Exactly.
Wanted the show
both
of faith.
ways, side of it, right? And
right.
for us to see, and then he would always point to the Father.
Right.
When he did things, give the Father the credit when he did stuff. But it's just interesting just how personal relationship wise. I mean,
right.
That's what we're getting from looking at it all these
Sure.
years later. Is how he loved and wanted to give of himself.
Right.
And like you're saying, that was probably draining.
Right.
That's why every morning you started out with prayer.
Right.
We don't know for hours.
Multitudes just warned him.
Right.
Yeah, so you can imagine the effect that was having.
Yeah. All right, very good. All right, 18 through 22. Someone like to read this one?
Sure. When Jesus saw the crowd around him, he gave orders to cross to the other side of the lake. Then a teacher of the law came to him and said, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." Jesus replied, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." Another disciple said to him, "Lord, first let me go and bury my father." But Jesus told him, "Follow me and let the dead bury their own dead."
Okay, so two different people trying to follow Jesus here. Two different reactions, two different stories here, two different lessons here. So the first one, why do you think Christ has this little statement about the foxes having holes and the birds having nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay? What was the purpose of this response to the scribe saying that he will follow?
It's going to be a hard journey.
So he's basically warning them. Are you sure? Are you going to count? Are you counting the cost? Are you counting the cost before you go ahead and do this? So that's certainly something to keep in mind. Know that the cost is great there. The reward is great, but he wanted to make sure he understood that. All right, the second story. First, let me go bury my father. Follow me and let the dead bury their own dead. Now, that sounds a little cold. What is Christ trying to? What point is he trying to drive home there? Priorities, right? There's a priority there. And what does he mean by the dead bury their own dead? What do you think he means by that? What do you think he means by the dead? The first dead, I guess. There's two dead. Yeah, he's talking about, so there are people that will not have the desire to follow me. you know, they can deal with the minutiae of the things of this life. You know, that's, you know, if you're willing to follow me, you know, the time is now. Let's go. You know, so I think two interesting contrasts there.
Scott, I've got a note here in my Bible and stuff about that too. That we probably have a hard time understanding that because somebody dies and a couple of days later there's a funeral and that's pretty much it. They were talking about how in Jewish custom at that time, funerals could last up to a year.
Yeah, you'd have a period of mourning or whatever.
Yeah, you've got a lot of things that they do and stuff. So
yeah.
That would be, you know, I'll get back with you next year.
Yeah.
Type of thing, not
not.
Funeral's not gonna be able to.
Like I got a funeral to go to at 12 o'clock, and then
Yeah.
I'll come join you.
Yeah. So sometimes it may be a little bit harder for us to understand.
Yeah. That is probably true. Yes, it is more of just the mindset of being in the period of mourning for a long period of time. I think it's time
And Jesus also knows their heart.
Yeah.
Sometimes people will volunteer or say they're going to volunteer in front of a crowd to make themselves look good,
Right.
but you'll never see them
Right.
unless the crowd leaves.
Right. All right. I'll go ahead and read this one real quick. When he got into the boat, his disciples followed him, and behold, a violent storm developed on the sea, so that the boat was being covered by the waves. But Jesus himself was asleep, and they came to him and woke him, saying, "Save us, Lord, we are perishing." He said to them, "Why are you afraid, you men of little faith?" He got up and rebuked the winds and the sea, and it became perfectly calm. The men were amazed and said, "What kind of a man is this that even the winds obey him?" So one of the things that I think is somewhat interesting here is contrasting this statement with this statement. You know, what did they expect him to do right there? You know, it could be as simple of, well, we got 8 guys trying to hold this sail up. We need a 9th. Can you help grab the sail? It could be as simple as that, but it could be something more of, it's almost like they had faith.
I think they had trust that he could do something.
He could do something, but there was some sort of limit on what he could do. You know, maybe he could,
if he can heal the sick, which they've just been doing,
right.
surely he can.
He can do. He can think of something
keep
here.
us from sinking.
Right. He can
But
do
not
something
in the
here.
way
Bail water.
You're right. Bail water. You know, maybe have the boat take the magic path, to the shore or something. But I think it is interesting that they have faith enough to wake him up, but are shocked when he actually,
That's probably more power than they'd ever seen him show.
That's certainly the case, and it is certainly the case that this was even a different level of power. I ask you, I'm thinking off the top of my head, and so this is scary. I do this in class, but what do you think is more powerful? Being able to change the weather or heal the sick?
Changing the weather. It did show the extent of his authority. It was over physical things too, not just, getting rid of the sickness.
Right.
If you think about it from today's terms, we have advanced medical technology. We have, it's not uncommon to see people be healed from an ailment. Mm-hmm. It is uncommon to see somebody on death's door come back to fully functional, but still,
for a non-believer, it's like, well, that's science.
Right.
But to tame what nobody else can possibly do, no physician can change the weather. So from a humanistic perspective of, oh, my doctor could have done that, no big deal, but nobody could do this.
Right. Okay. I think one thing that's almost kind of points out though is that I think it's a neat point of this is that, you know, Jesus wanted them to realize that being with him was being in the calm and the storm. And that is almost, you know, kind of the way his phrasing is worded there. That that they should have had enough faith that, you know, that he would be able to carry them through. All right, here's the pig story. Let's see. Someone want to read this real quick? Matthew 8:28-34.
And when he came to the other side into the country of the Gadarenes, 2 demon-possessed men confronted him as they were coming out of the tomb. They were so extremely violent that no one could pass by that way. And they cried out, saying, "What business do you have with us, Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time?" Now there was a herd of many pigs feeding a distance from them, and the demons begged him, saying, "If you are going to cast us out, send us into the herd of pigs." And he said to them, "Go." And they came out and went to the pigs, and behold, the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned in the waters. And the herdsmen ran away and went to the city and reported everything, including what had happened to the demon-possessed men. And behold, the whole city came out to meet Jesus. And when they saw him, they pleaded with him to leave their region.
Okay, so you all heard my alarm go off, which we're not where I wanted to be. So I want to fly through this, and then I do want to get to the calling of Matthew. I want to talk about that a little bit today. So these demons interact with Jesus. I think that's one thing that's interesting about that. The first statement, or the ancient world felt demons were responsible for all sorts of things. Some of the things we don't think they probably were responsible for, things like epilepsy and things like that. But these demons definitely interact with Jesus. These 2 men definitely seem to be truly demon possessed because the demons talk to them. They know who he is. They mention something about before the time, which is kind of interesting. What do you think they meant by that? You know, when the demon said, "Why are you going to cast us out before it's time?" How did they know what the timetable was? You know, that was kind of interesting that they are aware of who Jesus is. He has, a mission, but they know that he's still at the beginning of his ministry. You know, their awareness of that is somewhat interesting. Why do you think? What did the pigs running into the sea prove to the 2 men? So that they truly were gone. That the demons truly were out of them and were in the pigs. You know, that was sort of that. And then I think another thing that's interesting about this is that, the reaction was, well, why did Jesus do something? We've had these 2 crazy guys on our street for however many years, and they're not crazy anymore, but the worst thing that's happened is we've lost a bunch of pigs. So I think that was interesting. All right, I'm going to spend the rest of the class. Let me step forward here to...
Hey, Scott.
Yes.
Just a question on the scriptures.
Okay.
Matthew says 2. Luke and Mark both say a demon-possessed man.
Yes.
I never caught that before, but I was
another thing that is interesting about the slight discrepancy, that they also mention a different city. It says the Gadarenes.
Gadarenes, yeah.
And Gerasenes, yeah. It's and those are two different places. And most scholars don't think they're talking about two different incidents. That somehow there's just been a little bit of something that's a little bit different in the translation.
You gonna blame King James?
And the recollection, well, a little bit different in the recollection of what. But this actually goes back. The Greek used the two city names. Okay, so I'll read this real quick, and I do want to talk about it. So, as Jesus went on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting in the tax collector's office, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. Then it happened that as Jesus was reclining at the table in the house, many tax collectors and sinners came and began dining with Jesus and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why is your teacher eating with the tax collectors and sinners?" But when Jesus heard this, he said, "It is not those who are healthy who need a physician, but those who are sick. Now go and learn what this means. I desire compassion rather than sacrifice, for I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners." So, first of all, Matthew himself. We talked about Matthew and his authorship, whether, it may be he didn't, but this would be almost, to me, I think the way these stories are put together, I think is a powerful statement that perhaps Matthew did write this. Because I think it's interesting that Matthew mentions his calling and then immediately goes into the second piece of this. So first of all, Matthew is a tax collector. As a tax collector, there's several things. One, to the Jews, he would have been public enemy number one to many of the Jews. He is what we would call a collaborator. He is somebody who is aiding the evil Romans to help their occupation out. The second thing is if he stays a tax collector, he probably has a pretty cush life, with the exception of probably having to hide from zealots and other things every once in a while. But he's probably very wealthy, and he's well paid for his services, has power, has the Roman army behind him. If he is a problem with something, he has a kind of a cush life. So Matthew's going to give up something to definitely go follow Jesus here. He's going to give up a life that could be easier, and as the world looks at more lucrative. And one of the things that we mentioned is one of the things about being a tax collector that leads maybe to the Gospel of Matthew being written is he's going to be pretty educated, which means he's going to be one of probably Jesus's most educated disciples. He's going to be one of definitely, and so the person that is in good position to be able to take down the parables and the teachings and the various things that we're going to see here. So I think those are all very interesting things about Matthew that Jesus does call him. And we know that Jesus also calls Simon the Zealot, which if you want to think of what the Zealots are the PLO. I mean, they really are. I mean, they did acts of terrorism. They were frequently murdering and robbing Roman shipments, and they were doing everything in their power to remove Rome from Israel. And so Simon the Zealot and Matthew would have been as completely opposite people to be on the same team as you could have. I mean, you would have these two people would have hated each other. I mean, they would have been, and I think it's powerful that Christ calls both of them, and they, both become his followers. Now, the second part of that. So I think another thing I think is powerful about this story is Matthew immediately goes into, well, here is something that Christ had to deal with because he called me, because he called me the tax collector. The Pharisees started to get on him. It's like, why are you associating with people like this? And not only associating with him, but making him one of his closest men. One of his So I think that's also a powerful story. So first of all, what do y'all think about that? What do y'all think about the calling of Matthew?
He's all in. He
Yeah.
can't go back to being a tax
Right.
collector.
He
He can't be a Jewish person.
Right.
It's either this or nothing.
Right. Yes. Very much so. He is all in. I think I definitely think that is a very powerful thing about this statement. Now, the second part of this about the associating with sinners. How many of y'all have seen the movie, the recent movie, Jesus Revolution? So, as I was reading this week, or I saw this Friday night, and there really seemed to be a real marriage of what that movie was trying to convey in this passage. As far as what Christ says about I've come for the sick. That was definitely what that character, the Lonnie Frisbee character in that movie, was saying in that. As he was saying, we have, we're all searching, and we're all searching in the wrong places. We need somebody to witness to us. So I think that kind of struck me. So what is so two other deep questions I have about this. One, what is wrong with the Pharisees' religion that they don't understand why Christ would do this? Why Christ would end up having dinner with tax collectors and sinners?
They were good shepherds. They weren't concerned about the people of their flock.
So they weren't concerned about the flock, right? Yes, I think that's a good way to put it. They weren't concerned about the flock. They were more concerned about proving they were holy as opposed to trying to get someone else to a state of holiness. That is. I think is definitely, and I do think there's a lesson for us in there. I think that's something we can fall into a trap of, that we're sometimes are more concerned about making sure we're righteous and just observing that others aren't, without realizing that we have been called to be fishers of men. It's not easy. It's not, but that is our calling, is that we need to bring them to a state of holiness.
I read something this week. It was a bit about our heritage and where we've come from, and that we've been more concerned with being right than righteous. And I thought it was one of those kind of ouch things, that I think I pray we're beyond that, but there was that time, and that's kind of pharisaical.
Right. Yes, I think so. That you're more concerned about making sure that you're right than necessary living Christ-like, making sure that you know what is supposed to be. Yeah.
So there's that little verse a little bit later that says, "It'd be better to have a millstone around your neck thrown in the sea rather than to cause somebody to stumble."
All right.
And so there's this concern, well, if I'm associating with this person and bringing them in, am I looking like that person? Or, is there a risk there of breaking one when you're in pursuit of the other?
Yeah, so that was and we're running out of time, but that is, I think that is certainly our fear in ourselves trying to minister sinners a lot, I think, isn't it? Is that we want to make sure we're not corrupted by them, that we are, and and I think that, you know, and fear that danger, and I think and I think that is tough, isn't it?
It's very risk averse. It's very risk averse. Our concept many times is we're not really trying to get to heaven. We're just trying not to go to hell.
Right. Yeah.
You know, plan not
That's
to
a
go
good way to put it.
You know? And that's really what we kind of got to reorganize.
That's a good way to put it. When we get mad at our sports teams when they play not to lose, right?
We're also afraid of what other people will say about us.
Yes.
We may not indulge in their sin, but if you're associated with that group or that, you're a lousy person.
Right. What's interesting, if you went back to one of those movies, there's a Jesus movie every so often. But I know one time watching one of those that Jesus, when he went to this feast and told about the prodigal son, as he approached this, there was dancing and righteous living almost. It looked like something we wouldn't even go near. You know, when you park next to the liquor store, you don't walk in front of it, you remember things around there. It's kind of one of those things. It's kind of, but Jesus just went right in there and sat in this thing and said, tell the story about that. And it's like, yes, he was proactive. He was proactive in a way we don't understand.
All right. Well, we're going to get y'all a little bit over, but we'll start. I'll probably go ahead and skip over to chapter 10.